Wrayburn Taylor, 32, sat frozen on her parents' living room sofa, watching her sister's children tear through expensive gift-wrapped boxes containing the latest Apple Watches. The same sister who had suggested a no-gift Christmas this year because money's tight for everyone. The same mother who had guilted Wrayburn into canceling her vacation fund to help with family expenses. As her nephew squealed with excitement, Wrayburn's mother leaned over and whispered, "We all agreed not to do gifts this year, remember? It's just that Jessica's kids have been through so much." Before I get into the full story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this family betrayal drama sounds familiar, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about karma coming full circle. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when a lifetime of family favoritism finally reaches its breaking point. Wrayburn Taylor had always been the reliable one. The daughter who put her family's needs above her own. The sister who never complained. The aunt who showed up. While her younger sister Jessica had built a reputation for drama, impulsivity, and endless crises that required family bailouts, Wrayburn had cultivated a life of quiet stability. She had a steady job as an architectural designer at a mid-sized firm in Portland, maintained a modest but comfortable apartment, and had been meticulously saving for her dreams, a down payment on her own home someday, and the occasional well-earned vacation. "Ray, honey, could you help your father with the bags?" her mother called from the kitchen as Wrayburn arranged her overnight things in the guest room of her parents' suburban home. Christmas had always been her favorite holiday, and despite the no-gift agreement this year, she'd been looking forward to the familiar comfort of family traditions. Her father's famous eggnog, the annual viewing of classic holiday movies, and her mother's cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. "Coming, Mom," she replied, heading down to help her father bring in the groceries. Charles Taylor, a retired high school principal with salt and pepper hair and perpetually kind eyes, was struggling to balance multiple paper bags. "There's my girl," he said warmly as she took 2 heavy bags from his arms. "Always my helper." Of course, Dad. Wrayburn smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of her father's appreciation, even as a small voice in the back of her mind wondered if helper was all she'd ever be in this family. They unpacked the groceries together, her father chatting about neighborhood news and the unseasonably cold weather. Marian Taylor bustled around the kitchen checking on her roast and periodically glancing at her phone. "Jessica just texted," Marian announced. "They're running late. Apparently Ryan has a work emergency he needs to handle first." Ryan was Jessica's husband of 7 years, a financial advisor with a talent for appearing important while somehow always being short on funds when family occasions required contributions. Wrayburn nodded, unsurprised. Jessica's family was chronically late to everything, a fact that had become so expected that her mother had started telling Jessica earlier arrival times than the rest of the family. "I hope everything's okay," Wrayburn said diplomatically. "Oh, you know how it is with Ryan's clients," Marian waved dismissively. "High-powered people with complicated finances. Not everyone works regular hours like you do, dear." The slight sting of her mother's words wasn't new. There had always been an unspoken hierarchy in the Taylor family. Jessica's chaotic, supposedly glamorous life somehow warranted more attention and consideration than Wrayburn's steady, reliable existence. As the afternoon wore on, Wrayburn helped her mother prepare dinner while her father watched football in the living room. She chopped vegetables, set the table with the good china, despite the scaled-back holiday they'd agreed upon, and listened to her mother's updates about Jessica's latest dramas, how difficult the private school tuition was for her kids, how stressful Ryan's job had been, how the renovations on their house were costing more than expected. "That's why we all agreed to skip gifts this year," Marian reminded her, stirring gravy on the stovetop. "Jessica and Ryan are really feeling the pinch, and we need to be supportive." Of course, Wrayburn agreed, remembering the email she'd received just a month earlier from her sister, suggesting they focus on togetherness rather than materialism this Christmas. She hadn't minded, in fact she'd been relieved. Her own finances had taken a significant hit when her parents' roof had needed emergency repairs in October. "We're all family," her father had said when calling to ask for her contribution. "We help each other out." Wrayburn had transferred $5,000 from her vacation fund without complaint, even though she knew Jessica hadn't been asked to contribute. The doorbell rang at 6:30 p.m., an hour after the agreed-upon arrival time. Wrayburn's niece and nephew, Emma 10 and Liam 8, burst through the door in expensive-looking winter coats, followed by Jessica radiating her usual frenetic energy, and Ryan tapping importantly on his phone. "Sorry we're late," Jessica said, air-kissing her mother's cheek. Traffic was a nightmare, and Ryan had a client emergency. She turned to Wrayburn with a quick hug. "Hey sis. Cute sweater. Is it new?" Before Wrayburn could answer, Jessica had moved on, directing Ryan to bring in what appeared to be several shopping bags from the car. "I thought we weren't doing gifts," Wrayburn said quietly to her mother. Marian patted her arm. "Oh, it's just a few small things for the kids. You know how children are at Christmas." Wrayburn nodded, swallowing the observation that she had in fact brought small gifts for her niece and nephew, books she thought they'd enjoy wrapped in paper she'd had left over from last year. Nothing extravagant, respecting the agreement but not wanting to disappoint the children. What she couldn't have anticipated, however, was just how thoroughly the no-gift agreement would be shattered over the next 24 hours, or how that betrayal would finally push her to re-examine every assumption she'd ever made about her place in the Taylor family. The Taylor family gathered around the dining table that evening, the familiar faces illuminated by the soft glow of the antique chandelier that had hung there since Wrayburn was a child. Her mother had pulled out all the stops, despite the supposed scaled-back holiday. The good china gleamed, crystal glasses sparkled, and the table groaned under the weight of a feast that must have cost hundreds of dollars to prepare. "This looks amazing," Mom Wrayburn said, genuinely impressed by the spread. "Well, Christmas only comes once a year," Marian replied with a smile. "We can be practical without being miserly." Jessica arrived at the table last, having spent 30 minutes on a work call that everyone could hear was actually with her hairstylist about an upcoming appointment. She slid into her seat across from Wrayburn and immediately reached for the wine. "God, I needed this," she sighed dramatically, pouring herself a generous glass. "This year has been absolute insanity." "How's the new position going?" Wrayburn asked, genuinely interested. Jessica had recently been promoted to marketing director at the boutique agency where she worked part-time. "It's overwhelming," Jessica replied, launching into a detailed account of office politics and demanding clients. "And the hours are killing me. 3 days a week might not sound like much, but when you're also trying to manage 2 kids' schedules and a household." Wrayburn nodded sympathetically, though she couldn't help comparing Jessica's part-time schedule to her own 50-hour workweeks. She pushed the thought away, feeling guilty for the comparison. "Pass the potatoes, would you?" Ray, her father, interrupted, and the conversation shifted to safer territory, neighborhood gossip, Ryan's golf game, and the children's school activities. "Emma's teacher says she has real potential in science," Jessica announced proudly. "We're looking into special enrichment programs, but they're so expensive." Marian beamed at her granddaughter. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You know education is the best investment." Speaking of investments, Ryan interjected, setting down his fork with authority. "I've been advising several clients to reallocate their portfolios given the market conditions. It's a challenging landscape right now." Wrayburn resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Ryan's financial wisdom seemed suspiciously generic, yet her parents always listened raptly, as if he were Warren Buffett offering exclusive insights. "How's your job going, Wrayburn?" her father asked, almost as an afterthought. "It's good," she replied. "I'm actually leading the design team for a new sustainable apartment complex downtown. It's been challenging but rewarding." "That sounds nice, dear," her mother said vaguely, before turning to Jessica. Now tell me more about this science program for Emma. The familiar pang of invisibility washed over Wrayburn as the conversation once again centered on her sister's family. It had always been this way, Jessica's achievements, challenges, and even complaints somehow shining brighter than anything Wrayburn accomplished. After dinner, as the adults settled in the living room with coffee and the children played with their tablets on the floor, Jessica brought up the topic of summer plans. "We're thinking of taking the kids to Europe next summer," she said, casually stirring cream into her coffee. "They're at the perfect age to really appreciate the history and culture." Europe. Wrayburn couldn't help but ask. "I thought you were feeling the financial pinch." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Well, we're making sacrifices in some areas to prioritize experiences," Ryan explained smoothly. "It's about values." "That sounds wonderful," Marian enthused. "What countries are you thinking of visiting?" As Jessica launched into an elaborate itinerary spanning France, Italy, and Spain, Wrayburn thought about the vacation to Mexico she had canceled to help with her parents' roof. A long weekend in Cancun had hardly seemed comparable to a European tour, yet somehow her sacrifice had been expected, while her sister's extravagance was celebrated. Later that night, as everyone prepared for bed, Wrayburn overheard her mother and Jessica whispering in the hallway. "Did you bring everything?" Marian asked. "Yes, but are you sure about this?" Jessica replied. "I thought we agreed. It's Christmas," Marian interrupted. "We can't have nothing for the children to open." "Wrayburn will understand. She always does." Wrayburn quietly closed her bedroom door, a knot forming in her stomach. What exactly would she be expected to understand in the morning? As she lay in bed, staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling of the guest room, formerly Jessica's bedroom, preserved with many of her high school mementos while Wrayburn's had been converted to storage years ago, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring more than the usual small disappointments she had grown accustomed to brushing aside. What she didn't know was that Christmas morning would finally shatter the carefully constructed illusion that had defined her family relationships for decades, forcing her to confront truths she had long avoided and ultimately setting her on a path toward an unexpected reckoning. Christmas morning arrived with the soft pink light of dawn filtering through the guest room curtains. Wrayburn woke to the familiar sounds of her mother in the kitchen, and the faint aroma of cinnamon rolls baking. For a moment, wrapped in the cocoon of childhood memories, she could almost forget the unsettling conversation she'd overheard the night before. She pulled on her robe and slippers before heading downstairs, where she found her father already seated at the kitchen island with his coffee and newspaper. "Merry Christmas, kiddo," he said warmly, patting the stool beside him. "Merry Christmas, Dad," she replied, accepting the mug of coffee her mother handed her. "Did you sleep well?" Marian asked, checking the oven. "Jessica and the kids are still asleep, of course. That sister of yours could sleep through an earthquake." "I slept fine," Wrayburn answered, not mentioning her restless night or the conversation she'd overheard. Maybe she'd misunderstood. Maybe nothing for the children to open referred to some small stocking stuffers, not a violation of their agreement. Jessica and her family finally appeared around 9, the children already glued to their tablets, Jessica yawning dramatically, and Ryan checking his phone. "Merry Christmas, everyone," Jessica announced, making a beeline for the coffee. "Mom, those cinnamon rolls smell amazing." After breakfast, they gathered in the living room as they always had. Wrayburn noticed several large shopping bags had mysteriously appeared near the Christmas tree, a tree that had been conspicuously bare of gifts when she'd gone to bed. "What happened to our no-gift agreement?" Wrayburn asked, trying to keep her tone light. Her mother looked momentarily flustered. "Well, we couldn't have nothing under the tree on Christmas morning. It's just a few small things." Jessica avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in adjusting her sweater. Ryan smirked slightly, as if enjoying a private joke. "Kids, come see what Santa brought you," Marian called out, effectively ending the discussion. Emma and Liam abandoned their tablets and raced to the tree. What followed was a flurry of torn wrapping paper and escalating exclamations of delight as gift after gift was revealed. Expensive Lego sets, designer clothes, the latest video games, and finally the coup de grace, matching Apple Watches for both children. "These are the new ones," Liam exclaimed, his eyes wide. "Tyler at school said they cost more than $1,000. "Well, Santa knows how good you've been," Jessica said, with a wink toward her parents. It was then that Marian leaned over to Wrayburn and whispered those fateful words. "We all agreed not to do gifts this year, remember? It's just that Jessica's kids have been through so much." Wrayburn stared at her mother, momentarily speechless. Been through what exactly? Their parents' divorce. That had happened 5 years ago, and Ryan provided more than adequately for them. The move to a bigger house in a more prestigious school district, the trauma of having to switch from one private school to another, I see, was all she managed to say, her mind racing as she calculated the total value of the gifts strewn across the floor, easily several $1,000s. The same parents who had needed $5,000 for an emergency roof repair had somehow found enough money to lavish Jessica's children with luxury items. More disturbing than the money, though, was the casual deceit. The pretense that they were all making sacrifices together, when in reality, Wrayburn was the only one expected to actually honor the agreement. As the gift opening continued, Wrayburn quietly retrieved the small packages she'd brought for her niece and nephew from her overnight bag. "I have something small for you two as well," she said, handing them each a wrapped book. Emma and Liam accepted the gifts with noticeably less enthusiasm than they'd shown for their electronic bounty. Emma unwrapped Women in Science, a beautifully illustrated collection of biographies Wrayburn had thought might nurture her interest. "Thanks, Aunt Ray," Emma said politely, setting it aside without opening it. Liam was even less diplomatic about his illustrated book of world architecture. "I already have too many books," he commented, before returning to his new Apple Watch. "They're at an age where reading isn't their favorite," Jessica explained, with a dismissive wave. Wrayburn nodded, swallowing her disappointment. She'd chosen those books thoughtfully, considering each child's interests, staying within the spirit of their agreement, while still wanting to give something meaningful. "Oh," Marian suddenly exclaimed. "I almost forgot. We have a little something for you too, Wrayburn." Her mother handed her a small, hastily wrapped package. Inside was a bath set from the local pharmacy, the kind that ends up in the clearance bin after Valentine's Day. The price sticker was still attached, $7.99, marked down from $12.99. "Thank you," Wrayburn said, automatically the contrast between this token gesture and the lavish gifts bestowed upon her sister's family too stark to ignore. "We know you love your bath products," her mother added, not quite meeting her eyes. As the morning wore on, Wrayburn found herself retreating into silence, observing her family as if seeing them clearly for the first time. Her parents fawning over Jessica's children. Jessica's practiced performance of gratitude tinged with entitlement. Ryan's smug satisfaction at being part of the favored branch of the family tree. It wasn't about the gifts themselves. Wrayburn had never been materialistic. It was about the lies, the manipulation. The realization that the family narrative she'd accepted all these years, that they supported each other equally, that sacrifices were shared, that her reliability was valued rather than exploited, was a convenient fiction. During a moment when everyone was distracted by helping Liam set up his Apple Watch, Wrayburn slipped outside onto the back porch, needing air and space to process the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. The cold December air bit at her cheeks as she stared across the backyard where she and Jessica had played as children. She pulled out her phone and, almost without conscious decision, opened her banking app. There it was, the transfer to her parents from October, $5,000. Money that could have gone toward her own home. Money that apparently had not gone toward a roof repair at all. As she stood there, a text message appeared on her screen from her friend Daniela. "Merry Christmas. How's the family gathering going? Wrayburn stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. How could she possibly explain what she was feeling? The years of inequality. The casual gaslighting. The sudden crystalline clarity that she had been played for a fool by the people she loved most. She was about to respond when the back door opened behind her. "There you are," her father said. "Your mother's serving dessert. Is everything okay?" Wrayburn turned to look at her father, the man who had always been her hero, who had taught her the value of honesty, integrity, and family loyalty. Had he been complicit all along, or merely blind to the disparity in how his daughters were treated? "Dad," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Dad," Wrayburn repeated, holding her father's gaze. "What happened to the money I gave you for the roof repairs?" Charles Taylor's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of discomfort crossing his features before settling into careful neutrality. "We used it for the repairs, of course." "Why do you ask? Did you ask Jessica to contribute too?" Wrayburn pressed, already knowing the answer. Her father glanced toward the house as if checking whether anyone might overhear them. "Your sister's situation is different, with 2 kids and those school tuitions. So that's a no," Wrayburn concluded flatly. "You didn't ask her." "Wrayburn, you know your sister and Ryan have a lot of expenses. And I don't." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, years of suppressed frustration suddenly finding voice. "Dad, I've spent my entire adult life being the responsible one. I come when you call. I help when you ask. I gave up a vacation I'd been saving for because you said the roof was an emergency." Her father's expression hardened slightly. "It was an emergency. Was it because from where I'm standing it looks like there was enough money for Apple Watches and European vacations, but not enough to fix your roof without dipping into my savings?" The back door opened again, and Marian appeared, wrapping her cardigan tightly around herself against the chill. "What are you 2 doing out here? The pie is getting cold." Wrayburn turned to face her mother, a strange calm settling over her. "Mom, I was just asking Dad about the roof repairs. The ones I contributed $5,000 to in October." Marian's smile faltered. "Oh, that. Yes, we're so grateful for your help, dear. The contractor did a wonderful job." "Which contractor?" Wrayburn asked. "What company did you use?" Her parents exchanged a quick glance. "Why all these questions?" Marian asked, her voice taking on the slightly wounded tone she typically employed when challenged. "It's Christmas, Wrayburn. Let's not spoil the day with boring talk about home repairs." "It's not boring to me," Wrayburn insisted quietly. "Not when I'm looking at thousands of dollars worth of gifts under the tree after we supposedly all agreed to scale back because money's tight." Marian's expression hardened. "I don't appreciate your tone, Wrayburn. If you must know, we did use some of that money for the roof. And some went to help your sister with the children's tuition this semester. As a family, we support each other where the need is greatest." The confirmation hit Wrayburn like a physical blow. They had lied to her not just about Christmas gifts, but about why they needed her money in the first place. "You lied to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We did not lie," her father countered, his tone taking on the authoritative edge he'd used when she was a child caught misbehaving. "We needed help with family expenses, and the roof was one of those expenses." "But that's not what you told me," Wrayburn insisted. "You specifically said it was an emergency roof repair. You never mentioned Jessica's tuition payments." "Because we knew you'd help without question," Marian replied, as if this somehow justified the deception. "You've always been our reliable one." The phrase hit Wrayburn like a slap. Her reliability, the characteristic she'd always taken pride in, reframed as gullibility. A quality to be exploited rather than respected. "And Jessica, does she know where her children's tuition money came from this semester?" Another telling glance between her parents. "We didn't see any need to burden her with that information," her father said carefully. So she thinks you paid it yourselves, Wrayburn concluded. She has no idea that her Apple Watches and European vacation plans are being subsidized by her sister's sacrifices. You're blowing this completely out of proportion, Marian snapped, her patience visibly wearing thin. This is exactly why we handle things the way we do, Wrayburn. You've always been so rigid about money, so transactional. Transactional, Wrayburn repeated incredulously. Is that what you call expecting honesty from my own parents? The back door opened again and Jessica appeared looking annoyed. What's going on out here? The kids are asking where everyone went. Wrayburn turned to her sister, a sudden decision crystallizing in her mind. Jessica, did you know that your kids' last tuition payment came from my vacation fund? Jessica's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in surprise. What are you talking about, Wrayburn? That's enough, their father warned. But Wrayburn had moved beyond warnings. Years of swallowing her feelings, of accepting less, of being the good daughter who never complained, had reached their breaking point. In October, Mom and Dad told me they needed $5,000 for an emergency roof repair. I canceled my vacation plans and gave them the money. Turns out at least part of it went to your kids' tuition. Jessica looked genuinely shocked, her gaze darting between Wrayburn and their parents. Is that true? It's more complicated than that, Marian began, but Wrayburn cut her off. It's actually very simple, Mom. You lied to me to get my money. You used it to support Jessica's family without telling either of us the truth. And then you had the nerve to suggest a no-gift Christmas because money's tight for everyone, only to show up with thousands of dollars worth of presents for Jessica's kids. A tense silence fell over the four of them, broken only by the distant sound of the children playing inside. I think you're being incredibly selfish right now, Marian finally said, her voice cold. Your sister's children have needs, and I don't, Wrayburn interrupted. I've been saving for a down payment on a house for 5 years, Mom. 5 years of overtime and side projects and skipping vacations. And every time I get close, something comes up with this family that requires my financial contribution. We've done everything for you, her father countered, his expression darkening. Put you through college, supported you when you wanted to take that low-paying internship. Jessica went to college too, Wrayburn pointed out, and her internship was in Paris if I recall correctly. Somehow there was money for that. Your sister has always had different needs, Marian insisted. Different needs or different value to you? Wrayburn asked quietly. The question hung in the air like frost, impossible to ignore or dismiss. I think you need to calm down, her father said, finally. You're making accusations that you'll regret later. The only thing I regret is not seeing this pattern sooner, Wrayburn replied, a strange sense of liberation washing over her as she finally spoke her truth. I'm not the reliable daughter. I'm the reliable resource. The ATM you can tap whenever Jessica's lifestyle exceeds her means. That is completely unfair, Marian gasped. Is it? Tell me something. If I had children, would they get Apple Watches too? Or is that special treatment reserved for Jessica's kids? Her parents exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. That's what I thought, Wrayburn said softly. Jessica, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. I didn't know about the money, Ray, I swear. Mom and Dad told me they were handling the tuition this semester because of Ryan's job transition. Convenient timing, Wrayburn commented, though she believed her sister's surprise was genuine. We should go back inside, their father said firmly. This conversation isn't productive and you're ruining Christmas. I'm not the one who ruined Christmas, Wrayburn replied, a sudden clarity washing over her. But I am the one who's leaving. Don't be ridiculous, her mother scoffed. It's Christmas Day. Where would you go? Home, Wrayburn answered, simply. I'm going home. As she turned to go back inside and collect her things, Jessica reached out to touch her arm. Ray, wait. Let's talk about this. Wrayburn paused, studying her sister's face, the genuine concern there tinged with confusion. There's nothing to talk about, Jess. I don't blame you. You didn't know. But I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that the way this family operates is normal or fair. As she headed upstairs to pack her overnight bag, she could hear the heated whispers of her parents and sister behind her. For the first time in her life, Wrayburn found herself not caring what they were saying about her. The truth had been hiding in plain sight all along, waiting for her to finally see it. In this family, she would always come second. Her needs, her dreams, her sacrifices would always be considered less important than Jessica's. But there was one thing Wrayburn had that Jessica didn't: the ability to walk away and build a life on her own terms. And as she zipped up her bag and prepared to leave the house she'd grown up in, she realized that might be the most valuable gift of all. Hey everyone! Wow, this family drama is really heating up. Can you believe what Wrayburn just discovered? If you're enjoying this story of family betrayal and finally standing up for yourself, please hit that like button. Are you Team Wrayburn, or do you think she's overreacting? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to catch the rest of this family revenge story. The confrontation is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The drive back to Portland was surreal. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the highway with a deceptive peacefulness that stood in stark contrast to the storm raging inside Wrayburn's mind. Her phone buzzed repeatedly on the passenger seat, calls and texts from her parents and Jessica that she couldn't bring herself to answer yet. By the time she reached her apartment, the emotional adrenaline that had propelled her out of her parents' house had begun to fade, leaving behind a hollow ache and waves of doubt. Had she overreacted? Should she have stayed and tried to work things out? The familiar pull of family obligation tugged at her consciousness. She dropped her bags by the door and sank onto her sofa, finally picking up her phone to scan through the messages. Her father's texts were brief and authoritative. "Call us when you've calmed down and your mother is very upset." Jessica's were longer, more conflicted. "I had no idea about the money. Please believe me. We need to talk." There was another message too from Daniela. "Did you get my Christmas text? Hope the family gathering isn't too crazy this year." Wrayburn hesitated, then called her friend. Daniela answered immediately. "Merry Christmas. How's wait, aren't you supposed to be at your parents' until tomorrow?" "I left early," Wrayburn said, her voice cracking slightly. "Everything sort of imploded." "I'm coming over," Daniela declared, not waiting for a response. "Give me 20 minutes. Do not process this emotional trauma alone on Christmas." True to her word, Daniela arrived 20 minutes later, bearing a bottle of wine and leftover Christmas cookies. As they settled in Wrayburn's living room, she poured out the whole story: the financial deception, the Christmas morning revelation, the confrontation on the back porch. "I just don't understand," Wrayburn concluded, cradling her wineglass. "Has it always been this way and I was too blind to see it? Have I been the family doormat my entire life?" Daniela, who had met the Taylor family on several occasions, sighed deeply. "Honestly, yeah, kind of. I've watched your parents treat you and Jessica differently for years. I just didn't say anything because, well, it's your family." "Why didn't I see it?" Wrayburn asked, more to herself than to Daniela. "Because you didn't want to," Daniela replied gently. "Nobody wants to believe their parents are capable of that kind of favoritism. And you've always been so committed to being the good daughter. It was like your identity." Wrayburn winced at the truth in her friend's words. Her reliability, her willingness to help, her avoidance of conflict, these traits had become so intertwined with how she saw herself that questioning them felt like questioning her entire identity. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," Daniela said firmly, "you establish boundaries. You don't cut them off if you don't want to, but you stop being the financial safety net. You stop dropping everything when they call. You start prioritizing your own dreams." Over the next few days, Wrayburn did just that. She declined her parents' increasingly insistent calls to talk this out, and instead used the unexpected time off to reflect on patterns she'd been ignoring for years. The family emergencies that somehow always required her contribution, but never Jessica's. The way her achievements were acknowledged briefly, while Jessica's were celebrated extensively. The automatic assumption that Wrayburn would adjust her plans to accommodate everyone else's needs. On New Year's Eve, a text arrived from Jessica. "Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Just us. Please." After hesitating, Wrayburn agreed. They met at a quiet cafe near Wrayburn's apartment, the awkwardness between them palpable as they settled at a corner table with their drinks. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Jessica began, without preamble. "About what happened at Christmas." "About everything." Wrayburn nodded, but said nothing, waiting. "I didn't know about the money, Ray. I swear. Mom and Dad told me they were covering this semester's tuition as a gift, because of Ryan's job transition." Jessica stared down at her latte. "But after you left, I started thinking about other things. About how often they've helped us over the years. About how they never seem to ask you if you need help even though you're single and don't have Ryan's income." "They don't ask because they assume I'll manage," Wrayburn replied. "I'm the responsible one, remember?" "I know," Jessica said quietly, "and I've benefited from that my entire life." The admission hung between them the first time either of them had explicitly acknowledged the disparity in how they were treated. "I talked to Ryan," Jessica continued, "about our finances. About the real cost of the kids' private school and the European vacation we were planning." She looked up, meeting Wrayburn's gaze directly. "We can afford it, Ray. We've always been able to afford it. Ryan makes good money, and my job pays well for part-time. We're not struggling, we just like to complain about expenses, because it's what our social circle does." The casual confirmation of what Wrayburn had begun to suspect felt like another betrayal. "So why did Mom and Dad think you needed help with tuition?" Jessica had the grace to look ashamed. "Because I told them we did. Not directly, but I've always known how to work the system with them. I complain about expenses, mention the kids' activities, talk about how stressed we are about money, and they offer to help. I never thought about where that money was coming from. I just assumed they had plenty saved." "They do have savings," Wrayburn said. "But apparently, they'd rather tap into mine than touch their own." Jessica nodded slowly. "Ryan said something that really hit me. He said, your parents treat you like the favored child and Wrayburn like the family bank. And he's right, isn't he?" The acknowledgement, so simple yet so profound, loosened something tight in Wrayburn's chest. After years of doubting her perceptions, of making excuses for her family's behavior, here was validation from the most unexpected source. "What are you going to do?" she asked her sister. "For starters, I'm returning the kids' Apple Watches," Jessica replied. "They don't need them. And we're canceling the European vacation, at least the extravagant version we had planned. Maybe a more modest trip later." "You don't have to do that because of me," Wrayburn began, but Jessica cut her off. "I'm not doing it because of you. I'm doing it because it's right. Because my kids are growing up thinking they deserve everything without working for it. Because I've been taking advantage of Mom and Dad's favoritism without considering the consequences." They talked for nearly 2 hours, peeling back layers of family dynamics they'd never openly acknowledged before. For the first time, Wrayburn felt she was seeing her sister not as a competitor or as the favored child, but as a fellow adult capable of recognizing unhealthy patterns. "I can't promise I'll change overnight," Jessica said as they prepared to leave. "But I'm going to try. And I've told Mom and Dad we need to have a family meeting, all of us, to talk about how things are going to be different moving forward." Wrayburn wasn't sure if such a meeting would actually change decades of established family patterns, but she appreciated the gesture. "I'd be willing to try that. But I need some time first." January passed in a blur of work projects and quiet self-reflection. Wrayburn limited contact with her parents to brief text messages, deflecting their attempts to return to business as usual without addressing what had happened at Christmas. Jessica kept her updated about the promised family meeting, which their parents had reluctantly agreed to attend in early February. They still think you're overreacting, Jessica reported during one of their now regular phone calls. Dad says you misunderstood about the roof money. I didn't misunderstand anything, Wrayburn replied firmly. They lied to me about why they needed the money, and they'd still be lying if I hadn't confronted them. The day before the scheduled family meeting, Wrayburn received an unexpected email from Ryan, with the subject line, "You might want to see this." Attached was a spreadsheet detailing all the financial help her parents had provided to Jessica's family over the past 5 years: tuition payments, home renovation contributions, vacations, even the down payment on their house. The total exceeded $150,000. "Jessica doesn't know I'm sending this," Ryan's message read. "But I think you deserve to know the full picture before tomorrow's meeting. Your parents have been playing favorites with their money for years while simultaneously tapping you for contributions. It's not right, and Jessica and I are done participating in it." Wrayburn stared at the figures, a strange sense of validation washing over her. She had suspected the disparity was significant, but seeing it quantified so precisely was still shocking. What was even more surprising was Ryan's apparent change of heart. The man who had seemed so smugly comfortable with the family's uneven dynamics, now positioning himself as an ally. The family meeting took place at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant, halfway between Portland and her parents' home. Wrayburn arrived early, the spreadsheet from Ryan carefully tucked into her bag, unsure if she would need to use it, but finding comfort in having concrete evidence. Her parents arrived next, her father gruff and distant, her mother attempting a warmth that fell flat given the circumstances. Jessica and Ryan came last, their unified front, a subtle but noticeable change from their usual dynamic. After awkward greetings and small talk, Jessica took charge, surprising Wrayburn with her assertiveness. "We're here because our family has a problem," she began bluntly. "We've developed patterns that are unhealthy and unfair, particularly regarding money and expectations. And it's time for that to change." Marian immediately became defensive. "If this is about Christmas, I think Wrayburn has blown things completely out of proportion. We've always treated both of you girls equally." "No, Mom," Jessica interrupted, "you haven't. And we all know it." Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Now Jessica, Dad, please," Jessica continued. "Ryan and I have been looking at our finances. We know exactly how much help you've given us over the years. Help that Wrayburn never received. Help we didn't actually need." Marian's face flushed. "We help where help is needed. Wrayburn has always been more financially stable. Because I live within my means," Wrayburn pointed out. "Because I don't expect bailouts every time I want something I can't afford." "We never said," Charles began, but Ryan, who had been silent until now, cut him off. "Actually, sir, you did. Many times." His tone was respectful, but firm. "You've repeatedly told Jessica and me that you were happy to help with expenses we could have handled ourselves. Meanwhile, you asked Wrayburn for $5,000 under false pretenses." "It wasn't false pretenses," Charles insisted. "The roof did need repairs. But that's not what my money was used for, was it?" Wrayburn asked quietly. Her parents exchanged uncomfortable glances but didn't respond. "I have the bank statements," Wrayburn continued. "The transfer I made to you in October, and the tuition payment to Westridge Academy 3 days later for exactly the same amount. You lied to me, Dad. Both of you did. We did what we thought was best for the family," Marian insisted, her voice brittle. "Jessica's children needed—" "Stop using my kids as your excuse," Jessica interrupted, her voice sharp. "My children don't need Apple Watches. They don't need private school. They don't need European vacations. Ryan and I can provide everything they actually need. What they do need is to grow up understanding the value of money and the importance of honesty, neither of which they're learning from the way this family operates." A heavy silence fell over the table. For perhaps the first time, Charles and Marion Taylor appeared genuinely speechless, their usual justifications and defenses stripped away by their favored daughter's unexpected alliance with her sister. "So, what exactly do you want from us?" Charles finally asked, his tone guarded. "I want my $5,000 back," Wrayburn said simply. "And I want an acknowledgement that what you did was wrong, not just using my money under false pretenses, but the years of financial favoritism. And I want you to stop offering us money," Jessica added. "Ryan and I are cutting ourselves off from your financial support. We're downsizing our lifestyle to what we can genuinely afford, and we're teaching our kids to do the same." Marion looked stricken. "But the children." "Will be fine," Jessica finished firmly. "Better than fine. They'll learn valuable lessons about priorities and living authentically." Charles studied his daughters with an expression Wrayburn couldn't quite read, something between resignation and grudging respect. "And if we don't agree to these terms, then we'll need to reassess our relationships moving forward," Wrayburn replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I love you both, but I won't continue to be manipulated or treated as less valuable than Jessica." "Same," Jessica added. "We're adults now. Our relationship needs to be based on mutual respect, not financial dependency or favoritism." Another silence fell, this one stretching out uncomfortably as their parents appeared to process the unified stance their daughters had never before presented. "We'll need to think about this," Charles finally said. "Take all the time you need," Wrayburn replied. "But understand that things can't go back to how they were. Too much has been revealed." As the meeting concluded with tentative plans to reconnect in a week, Wrayburn felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The family she had known, or thought she had known, was irrevocably changed. But perhaps, she reflected as she and Jessica walked to their cars together, what would replace it might eventually be healthier and more honest than what had come before. "I'm proud of us," Jessica said, quietly giving her sister a quick hug before they parted. "Me too," Wrayburn replied, realizing with some surprise that it was true. "Me too." 1 year later, Wrayburn unlocked the door to her new condo, the weight of the keys in her palm, still a novel sensation. After years of saving and one unexpected repayment from her parents, she had finally achieved her goal of homeownership. The modest 2-bedroom unit with its small balcony and view of the city park wasn't extravagant, but it was hers, purchased entirely with her own money and effort. "It's perfect," Daniela declared, setting down the box she'd carried up from the moving truck. "Absolutely perfect for you." "I think so too," Wrayburn agreed, smiling, as she surveyed the space that would soon be filled with her belongings. Her phone chimed with a text message from Jessica Hope. "The move is going well. Kids are excited for the housewarming next weekend. Need any help with unpacking?" The relationship between the sisters had transformed over the past year, growing into something neither of them could have imagined before the Christmas Day confrontation. Without the undercurrent of competition and resentment fostered by their parents' favoritism, they had discovered a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. Their parents' journey had been more complicated. The initial aftermath of the family meeting had been tense, with Charles and Marion retreating into wounded silence before eventually repaying Wrayburn's $5,000 without explicitly acknowledging the deception. Progress had been slow and uneven, old habits of favoritism occasionally resurfacing, requiring firm but compassionate redirection from both daughters. The most significant change had been in Jessica's family. True to their word, she and Ryan had scaled back dramatically, moving to a smaller house in a less prestigious neighborhood, transferring the children to public school, and adopting a more modest lifestyle. To everyone's surprise, Emma and Liam had adapted remarkably well, even thriving under the new expectations and boundaries. "Your sister's coming up," Daniela announced, glancing out the window to the street below. "And she's got the kids with her." Moments later, Jessica appeared at the door with Emma and Liam, all three carrying moving supplies. Surprise, we thought you could use some extra hands. And I brought your housewarming present early, Emma announced, proudly handing Wrayburn a carefully wrapped package. I made it myself. Inside was a framed collage of family photos, old and new, carefully arranged to tell the story of the Taylor sisters through the years. What struck Wrayburn most was how Emma had captured the subtle shift in family dynamics, the earlier photos showing the obvious favoritism toward Jessica and her family, the more recent ones reflecting a new balance and genuine connection. It's beautiful, Wrayburn said, genuinely touched. Thank you. Mom helped me understand about how things used to be different, Emma explained, with the straightforward honesty of an 11-year-old. About how Grandma and Grandpa weren't always fair. She said it was important for me to know, so I don't make the same mistakes. Wrayburn glanced at her sister, who shrugged with a small smile. Kids understand more than we give them credit for. And I want them to learn from our family's mistakes, not repeat them. As they unpacked and arranged Wrayburn's belongings throughout the afternoon, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The Christmas Day confrontation had been painful, even traumatic, but it had ultimately been necessary, the catalyst for change in a family system that had been dysfunctional for decades. Later that evening, after Jessica and the children had left, and Daniela had gone home, Wrayburn sat alone on her new balcony, watching the sunset over the city park. Her phone rang, her parents calling for their now regular Sunday check-in. "How's the new place?" her father asked after she answered, his tone carrying a warmth that had been absent for much of her life. "It's wonderful," she replied honestly. "Everything I hoped for." "We're very proud of you," her mother added, and for perhaps the first time, Wrayburn felt the comment was genuine rather than perfunctory. "You've worked so hard for this." The conversation continued, pleasant, respectful, occasionally still awkward, as they all continued to navigate their new relationship boundaries. When they hung up, Wrayburn found herself smiling. The family wasn't perfect, might never be perfect, but it was healthier than it had ever been. Her phone pinged with a text from Daniela. "How are you feeling about everything?" "Really?" Wrayburn considered the question carefully. The past year had been challenging, painful at times, as she dismantled her identity as the perpetual family caretaker and established new boundaries. There had been moments of doubt, of grief for the family she had thought she had, of guilt as decades of conditioning tried to reassert itself. But there had also been tremendous growth, unexpected allies, and a new sense of self-worth that no one could take from her. She had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for others, is to stop enabling unhealthy patterns, even when that means facing difficult truths. "I'm good," she texted back. "Really good." And sitting there in her own space, purchased with her own money, surrounded by the life she had built on her own terms, Wrayburn Taylor realized it was absolutely true. Wow, what a journey we've been on together. I'd love to know if you've ever experienced family favoritism or had to establish boundaries with loved ones. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This story of standing up for yourself and finding justice really resonated with me, and I hope it did with you too. If you enjoyed Wrayburn's path to finding her worth, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more family drama stories with satisfying endings. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize yourself sometimes. Thank you so much for watching my revenge Reddit-style story today, and remember, sometimes the best family is the one you choose to build around you. See you in the next video.